Hi, this is Zibby Owens, and you're listening to the award-winning podcast, Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. And speaking of books, I have two of my own books coming out this spring and summer. Princess Charming is a picture book, which debuts on April 19th, and Bookends, a memoir of love, loss, and literature, comes out on July 1st, and it is truly a labor of love. I hope you'll pre-order, order, and join me on tour as I go across the country. You can find out more at zibbyowens.com or bookendsmemoir.com. And you can follow me on Instagram at zibbyowens because I always post about everything. Enjoy the show. Adam Mansbach and Camila Alves McConaughey are the authors of Just Try One Bite, a children's book. Adam Mansbach is the author of the #1 New York Times bestseller, Go the Fuck to Sleep, excuse my language, the novels Rage is Back, Angry Black White Boy, and The End of the Jews, which was winner of the California Book Award, and a dozen other books, most recently the best-selling A Field Guide to the Jewish People, co-written with Dave Barry and Alan Zwiebel, and his memoir in verse, which we talked about a lot in this episode, by the way, I Had a Brother Once. You should definitely read that. It's so good. Mansbach wrote the award-winning screenplay for the Netflix original Barry, and his next feature film, Super High, starring Andy Samberg, Craig Robinson, and Common, is forthcoming from New Line. His work has appeared in The New Yorker, New York Times Book Review, Esquire, The Believer, The Guardian, and on National Public Radio's This American Life, The Moth, and All Things Considered. Camila Alves McConaughey, who is Matthew McConaughey's wife, by the way, in addition to being a wife, she is a mother of 3 and self-proclaimed woman on a mission, which I love. She is the founder of Women of Today, which you can find on Instagram at Women of Today or at womenoftoday.com, which is an amazing online community. And she is the co-founder of J.K. Livin Foundation with her husband, Matthew McConaughey. Welcome. We have 2 amazing guests here today on Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. We have Adam Mansbach. Am I pronouncing that right? Mansbach?
Mansbach.
Mansbach. Okay. Adam Mansbach.
Adam, you have no idea how many times they tried to get me to pronounce your last name properly. And I'm just like, you don't want to hear. I was like, you don't want to hear.
Thanks for making me feel better. And also Camila McConaughey. Did I pronounce that one right? Yes.
You got that one right.
Whereas I can't spell your last name no matter how many times I try. So we're even, really.
And they are the co-authors of Just Try One Bite, the new children's book, but they are so much more than that. But anyway, this is their collaboration. So welcome and excited to talk about your children's book and your careers and everything. How did you 2 partner up on this book?
Adam, you want to take it?
Sure. We're lucky enough to share management. We both are at 3 Arts Entertainment. And so word came to me that Camila was looking to do a children's book and looking for a collaborator. So they thought to bring me in, and we all got on the phone and kind of talked about it, quickly realized we each had 3 children and a lot of other things in common and, a similar outlook on some of these issues around parenting, around eating. And so we sort of started brainstorming about what this book might be, and then we kind of just took it from there.
That's amazing. I have 4 kids too, by the way. So I'm just like throwing my hat in the ring of kid overwhelm.
You're overqualified.
I don't know how you went for the 4th because I haven't been brave enough for it. And it doesn't seem like you neither, Adam.
No, listen, I don't even know how I ended up with this many. I'm real foggy on some of the details.
I must say that, really the reality, look, I had this thing in my head, right, of like what I wanted to do, the message, how I wanted to, I didn't want it to be something preachy and things like that. But my first language is Portuguese. I write long. And I'm like, there's no way I can, come up with a short version of what's in my head. And honestly, Adam, we got on the call, we talked that he said, and boom. I mean, the man just put it into words like that. And when I saw it, I was like, oh my gosh, that's exactly like what we talked about and what we, got into it. So really he made magic on turning a concept and thoughts and a mission really into something fun, funny that we can all enjoy today. Really, you made magic. Adam.
So crazy, Adam, because your other books were such failures. This seems so unlikely that you would do a good job with this book.
Yeah, I just try to keep plugging away. No amount of failure will stop me from continuing to write a bunch of rhymes.
I did really like the rhyming thing. Not all children's books obviously rhyme. And anyway, this was great. My kids do not eat healthy at all, no matter what I give them. And so turning the whole concept on its head to make the parents the ones who don't eat healthy was really brilliant. I loved it.
Yeah, that was fun. I think that was, when we kind of figured out that approach, it really crystallized for me. And then, it's funny, like when I saw the illustrations that Mike Bolt did, it really brought a whole other dimension. I've never been in this position before. I've always had illustrators on board early on. And like, it's a very different process to see the words go out and the art to come back in. And it's like now when I think of the rhymes, when I think of the family in the book, I think of the characters. I think of his illustrations. They're like, he did such a good job that they're now inextricable to me from, the text, which is kind of the highest praise I can give an illustrator.
It really is amazing the work he did. I was showing somebody last night the book actually, and they're like, he just really made it like as if you were at the dinner table with this family.
Yeah.
And I was like, it's all right. It just made it very cozy and you're there with them.
I particularly liked the peas in the cuffs of the pants. That was a nice touch. Hadn't thought about that. If only I wore pants with cuffs.
Okay. Classic move.
Classic move. Oh my gosh. Well, it's really awesome. There's this book by Christina Geist called Sorry Grown-Ups, You Can't Go to School. It's like the same thing, this like reverse psychology. You two should like package the book up or something, this is how you deal with school. This is how you deal with food. All these hapless grown-ups who, just can't get with the program. Anyway, not that you need a partner, but, and by the way, I interviewed Ricardo Cortez, your illustrator for the other books.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Like a year or two ago. So that's
Nice.
But you two, this children's book is an amazing collaboration, but the two of you individually have done such amazing things. And not to change the whole tone of this conversation, but Adam, I had a brother once, and it was so powerful and amazing and beautiful. And I'm really sorry for your loss, and just so impressed and moved and emotional from reading your book. I don't know. I have like a line I was hoping I could read if you didn't mind, but if you do, then I don't have to read from it. But
no, sure.
Camila, have you read that book of his? Is it like a prose poem?
I have not.
Oh my gosh, you have to read it. This is at the end of one of the sections, but you said, I'm throwing cliches at the wall. They say a velvet calm descends when people have decided, gather their supplies, chosen a place, an hour. Their moods lighten and their loved ones think they've turned a corner, which they have, a different corner. But in my head, that's where he always is, sitting in his car with me screaming, don't do it, from the back seat, like some spirit cursed to be unheard. And my mother's father's parents, the famous rabbi's kids, the minion makers of Burlington, Vermont, they squat atop the glass floor of the distant beyond, shaking their great woolly heads and asking why, of all things, did it have to be gas? Oh, I mean, it's amazing. Like, I know that in the book you wrote about how hard it was to even write about it, like the sort of self-referential, writing of it, how you could see how you couldn't even write. You were like, here it is. I don't want to start the prologue. I don't want to start it. Here I go. I mean, anyway, what was that like for you?
It was a writing process really unlike any I've ever experienced before. It took me 8 years to write a single word about my brother. And then when I did, I wrote that whole book in like 3 weeks or something, in this very kind of, in the room I'm sitting in right now, in this very kind of intuitive and intense and emotional process where I really had no idea where I was going. One of the reasons it took me that long to write about him is that I couldn't get a handle on what form that book ought to take. I tend to think first of, I think first as a novelist. So it was like, is this a novel? Is this a screenplay? Is this an essay? What form could this possibly take? The first book I ever wrote was a book of poetry, but aside from the kind of rhyming, kid stuff and the go the fuck to sleep stuff, I don't generally think to write in those forms. But very much by coincidence, I'd been commissioned to write a piece for a SF jazz performance. I was asked to do a thing with a band a couple of weeks before this. It happened to be also the week that my brother would have turned 40. And all of these things kind of came together. And I came back from this week spent with a bunch of poets who I really respect and some of my closest friends and people I hadn't seen in a long time. And I was sort of like had been bathing in the power of poetry for a minute. And I came back and it kind of unlocked the subject matter for me. It allowed me to write in a way that no other form had, because you can get away with so little scaffolding in poetry. You can make ideas interlock simply by proximity. You can move from idea to idea with just a certain kind of rapidity. You can also push off from the shore very fast. Like, I sat down and wrote, for a day and had 20 pages. And it's like, psychologically, that makes you feel like, okay, I'm on my way here. This is becoming something quickly. You know what I mean? So yeah, it was a very weird writing process. And I was not, my family was like, what is happening? Because I would stagger out of the room and not really be present because I was just so absorbed in the work. And, so much of what I wrote was stuff that I had been thinking about for those 8 years, but a lot of other stuff was stuff I was actually figuring out in the writing process. Like there were connections I was making, thoughts I was having, ideas I was weaving together in the process of doing the work that were like revelatory to me. So I was sort of flabbergasted, just staggered by everything that was happening. So it was very intense.
Oh my gosh. Well, the end result was, it's heartbreaking, but absolutely beautiful. And, I've lost a loved one to suicide, not in my family, but anyway, I know that pain, not yours. I know you're not supposed to do that in grief, but I'm sure we've all had losses at this point in our lives. I feel like when I was younger, I'm like, oh, I've had loss when I was in my 20s. Now, like everyone's had loss, right? I'm in my mid 40s, but anyway.
Yeah, but what a blessing to be able to express that in such a beautiful and inspiring way, Adam.
Thank you. Yeah. No, I will say that my life and my sort of work-life balance feels much better to me having written that book. Like in all of that time leading up to it, between my brother's death and actually writing the thing, everything else I was doing, even if I was into it, and I was into all of it, I was like doing work that I felt good about, but I also felt in the back of my brain, there was this part of me that felt like everything I was doing was in avoidance of writing about him, writing that book, that everything else was like comparatively some light, easy, trivial shit if I didn't actually do this. So, having done it makes things feel, different for me in a way that I'm grateful for.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Really amazing. Well, actually, speaking of brothers, my brother produced Barry, by the way, the movie you were in. Yeah, Teddy Schwarzman. Did you?
That's your brother?
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. Wow.
Crazy, right? I didn't even know that. I was reading your bio before this, and last week I just accidentally interviewed somebody who wrote Mudbound, and I didn't even know she was the screenwriter for Mudbound. So I called Teddy and I was like, Teddy, now today I was like, Teddy, do you know Adam? Because I'm about to interview him. And he was like, yes, of course. So anyway.
That's so funny. Wow. Yeah, give him a hug for me.
I think he thinks I'm like trying to creep on all the screenwriters for his movies. It's like, leave me alone, anyway.
That's so funny. Yeah. Wow.
So yeah, that's my brother. I'm older.
Shout out to Teddy. Yeah. I love those guys. The whole Black Bear crew is great.
Yeah. You're like the most versatile. Every kind of writing, there's like no kind of writing you don't do. It's pretty awesome.
Like, yeah, I try to mix it up. Try to keep myself guessing.
That's amazing. And Camila, women of today, and I don't know, Adam, how familiar you are with this, not as a woman, but whatever, it doesn't matter if anybody.
No, I'm familiar. I'm a fan.
You're a fan. Good. It's the most amazing community, and her Instagram, I was just telling her, it's like so hilarious, bringing in her mother-in-law and really sharing so openly and honestly, which I love, particularly one in which she wasn't feeling well back in January. And then you said that you were like, that's why I'm using this beauty filter. And I was like, how nice that she said that, because I assumed there was no filter on that, right? I never would have known. So it's very refreshing to have that total authenticity. How did you even start this whole thing?
So Women of Today really came from a passion of learning from each other and building a community where you have, bigger conversations. So, starting 2005, okay, I'm going to get myself into trouble here with the years. But the reality is when I started these conversations, we weren't having the conversations that we're having today, right? And what I realized, I lived in so many different countries, and even on the south of United States, when I was living in different locations, I would realize that in a matter of days, I would have a community that could jump in and help me find things. In a matter of a week, I'm like, I know where the schools are, what the doctors to go to, their kids' activities, this, and if I'm talking to somebody, they go, well, I don't know this, but maybe my cousin does, or somebody I know does. And it was always connecting and learning from other people, right? And then I'll come back home or different places, and it'll be very close, very tight. And you just had your handful of people that you would call to ask questions. So I was like, we need to have an open conversation, especially between women. And we have men too in the community. It is majority women, but we have men as well. And I was like, we just need to have open conversations about things and learn from each other. So really, the community started with the basis of how can we do better for ourselves, do better for our family, do better for our community, and outside of that. Right. And that's what the whole website is about. And when I first started, so many people that I worked with was like, no, it has to be, your name, it has to be. And I say, no, this is not about me telling people what to do or how I do things. This is about me going, hey, I've learned this. This worked for me. I'm sharing with you. What have you learned that you can share back with us? Because I can learn something from you. We can learn something from each other. Right. And what has worked for me might not work for you, but it might work for somebody else, and vice versa, right? So all the content that you see on the website, that you see on the Instagram, it really is what the community is asking us to represent. Trust me, I did not start with a bunch of food. That was not my thing. And as the community started, it really got food heavy because it was a need that they really wanted to do better for themselves in food. And they were struggling quite a lot with that. So there it is. We got, anything from food to beauty to hacks to work to science. We got a little bit of everything. And we've been able to be very present during the pandemic with everybody at home. So the community really got to shine and do a lot of social work as well. So it's been quite of a journey that I take a lot of joy out of it.
Wow, I would have assumed that you were like this amazing passionate cook who
I would say I'm a passionate cook. Okay. The joke, if I'm in a good mood, the food is great. Now, if I'm a little bit off, it doesn't matter if I cook that recipe 1,000 times, it's just not that good.
My husband is the cook in our family. And after the pandemic, he's like, I never want to do this again. I can't do this. The kids wouldn't eat anything he made. He was just standing there dejected, so sad. So yeah, your book is the children's book in particular, and this whole thing is very welcome. Although I was a little disappointed by all the reminders not to eat sugar, because that seems to be an impossibility for me. I don't know how sugar heavy you are in your life, but cutting it out, I keep trying and it just fails.
I have a question for you. When you were a child, did you, in your household, was the conversation about sugar present or no?
No.
Okay.
It was about sweets. It was about
So there we go. This is so funny to me because I've been talking about this book and I say, hey, Adam and I are not here to tell you what to do as parents. I'm not telling you to follow a certain direction or another. But I will like to tell you, we will like to tell you that the conversation about the relationship with food and how it affects your body and what's good and what's not, that should start early on. And the earlier you start that, most likely you're setting your kids up to a long route of better for you habits. It's going to be easier. And I always joke, and I think it's a real thing. As you said, for me growing up, look, I come from a family of farmers. So the relationship, my dad is a farming to today. We have a farm together. It's the relationship from seed to table. It's very clear. It's boom, right? Now, we never talked about sugar. I could have as much sugar as I wanted. And what do I struggle with into today at my age? Sugar. And then I see my husband, which his parents had the conversation and monitor, let them have it, but not as much. And they understood, blah, blah, blah. He can now sit on a table, have a little bit of dessert. And he's like, I'm fine. I'm satisfied. And I'm like, how do you do that? I still struggle with it.
What about you, Adam? Sugar? Not issue?
in my, what we've done with sugar is one of the things that with my kids, I've been very deliberate about keeping them away from like refined sugar until they're like maybe 6 or 7, because what I've seen it do is just kind of like burn up people's palates. Like if you give young kids sugar, it's such a strong flavor. It's so pleasurable. It's, and like, I was just reading this Michael Pollan book where he's talking about the evolutionary reasons that we are so attracted to sugar and the whole history of it, and how before we had easy access to refined sugar, it was all about fruit. It was, this is like, this whole fascinating history. And it's like, it was survival based, right? A food that was high in sugar was telling you it wanted to be eaten so that you could help to spread its genetics, and also telling you that it wasn't going to poison you. And we really developed this evolutionary connection to sugar. But, the sugar in an apple is very different than like the sugar in like a Twinkie or whatever. So, yeah, what I've done with my kids pretty successfully is really limit their sugar, their like refined sugar at a young age, so that by the time it opens up a little, my 13-year-old, even my 5-year-old are kind of like, they'll try something now and they're like, it's too sweet, Because if all they get is that note of sweetness, it's like not that interesting to them, which keeps their palate a little wider. But Camila, I don't know if I told you this, but my cousin was married to a Brazilian woman. My brother was also married to a Brazilian woman. So I've had all these conversations about. First of all, I both of them could cook, and I learned some dishes and stuff. So I got a few Brazilian dishes in my entourage. But the funniest thing to me was always we'd be talking about like some fruit, right? My cousin's wife Simone would be describing like some amazing sounding Brazilian fruit that I'd never heard of, and like Googling a picture, and I'm like, oh my God, that looks incredible. Or she'd be talking about like a mango or a papaya. And I'd be like, so how do you got, what do you do with papaya in Brazil? She's like, oh, we put honey on it. Or like, oh, we put sugar on it. And I'd be like, what?
We can't, but like crystallize it. We crystallize it with sugar. Yes.
Yeah. So I'd be like, so you're taking the sweetest possible fruit and then dipping it in sugar? Okay, that explains some things. Like, so you're coming from a culture where that's what you do with fruit.
It is very true. It is very true. And you guys know this. Sugar acts like a drug in the brain. You get addicted, like it's proven, right? We did a whole thing on Women of Today. Maybe you want to check that out. We have a whole sugar talk on Women of Today, and we had different experts come in and talk to us about it. I'll tell you how I got my sugar thing a little bit down. And I don't know if you have tried this. See, for me, it was chocolate. I used to wake up and eat chocolate. I used to have a piece of chocolate before I went to bed, like next to my bed, literally like take a bite and then go sleep. It's horrible. And I slowly walk to your point, Adam, like, retraining your palate. It's where the change happens. Because if you don't, then your palate is always going to tell you, it doesn't taste that good to me. So like slowly, for me, I had to do slowly, like, walking down to the dark chocolate, but very like slowly, little baby steps. And now I'm like, I have that vegan chocolate. I don't know. Do you know that brand HU?
Yeah.
Yep. Love them. And they have the hazelnut chocolate's my favorite. So now I have that. I have a little bit, I'm good. Like, nice. I have a little moments as women, we go through our times of the month where it's like, give me the sugar, do not ask questions. Like, that's it. Right.
That seems to be my time all month. I don't know. I would like it to just be once a month, but no. Plus, I think I've obviously messed up my kids now listening to all of your good advice, because I don't know. I've been a little unrestricted about giving them sugar, and now, of course, I've ruined their palates, and they're messed up forever. But oh well.
No, they're not messed up forever. You just have to retrain the palate. I do a version with the kids where we used to do Friday, have whatever you want. So it's Friday free for all. Stay up late, watch movie, pizza night. What treats do you want? And they started with all 3. They just wanted candy, and I'm like, okay. I'll drive them to the gas station, go in, with whatever candy you want. They did, and we'll come in, watch movies and stuff. And then after we did that for a while, I was like, okay, now that they got they got the power of choosing what they want and getting what they want, I was like, well, what about like, instead of candy, let's do a dessert. Like, let's do like, what's your favorite dessert? Like, and, when it's cake, this or that. Okay, so let's go and get it. Like, so we would go to a bakery or a supermarket and get that dessert. And then after I did that for a little bit, I'm like, well, should we make it? Like, should we try, what should we make? So it started like, again, that process of giving them the power. And then in the middle of that, sliding in information about what, how bad the candy versus a real dessert. Now a dessert that you buy outside and dessert that you make it. And then now, like, they don't even, when we get to Friday night, they're just like, I just have a little ice cream. Like we did it this last Friday. I was like, let's do it, guys. And we went to the supermarket. It was like, they were like, so fired up. But again, like they still get like 2 things each,
And then don't they want the leftovers? That, like, I feel like we'd get the ice cream pint and then like the next morning they'd be like, okay, breakfast.
You have to watch
the gas station. The gas station for candy. All right, let's go to the gas station. Get the candy.
That's it.
That's so funny. It's funny because I'm thinking about when I was a kid and the sort of demonized foods when I was a kid. It wasn't really sugar. It was fat. It was like cholesterol. True. It was, this is the 80s, right? It was like margarine instead of butter, that kind of thing, which we look back on and it's like, that doesn't make any sense nutritionally. Nobody should be doing that. Nobody should be eating margarine instead of butter or like whatever, like non-fat yogurt. Like these are the wrong things to be worried about. And a lot of fat is good fat and blah, blah, blah. There's always that question of like, what will our children look back on and be like, my parents were obsessed with this aspect of health that turned out to be completely incorrect,
I feel like my next book should be Scarred by Snackwells.
Yeah.
Right? It's like this. Yeah. Like I can eat a whole, package of these because there's no fat. I'll be fine.
Yeah, to this day, my father's vegan, right? So I grew up with a vegan father in Boston in the 80s. Vegan food in Boston in the 80s was not delicious, right? And it was like, but what to me, like the treats in my house, I mean, my mom ate fairly normally, so she had her like drawer of chocolate and stuff like that. But the vegan food was all this like very heavily processed, like fake meat kind of stuff. I would get these packages of Morningstar Farms fake bacon, right? Which was made to look like bacon. Because I guess the thinking was like, you stopped eating bacon, but you want something that looks as much like it as possible. It had a fake strip of fat even in it, and you would like cook it. And it was basically just like, I don't know what it was, but it was mostly sodium, it seemed to me. It was just like very salty, crispy. And like, we thought that was good for us, but it was like probably more heavily processed than anything else in my house, You
touched in such a good point there, because honestly, we haven't come that far from what you're describing right now. A lot of the fake meats and all that stuff, it's all over processed things and things that, are not necessarily that good. I'm more to the philosophy of have whole foods.
Yeah.
Like, which is what we talk in the book. Yeah. It's what we talk on Just Try One Bite, right? Have whole foods. Your body is going to tell you what can take, what cannot take, you can communicate. But if you have a majority of whole foods and not just over processed foods, it can do its job. It's got a good fighting weight to go against the other stuff.
Right.
I did like how you guys called them slow foods instead of fast foods. That was good, right? Slow. Okay, so now that I've basically forgot we're even doing a podcast, what advice would you have for aspiring authors, both of you, now that Adam, you've written like 8,000 books, but with your children's book and everything else?
Look, I'm going to jump in here first and then Adam can go next because this is his expertise. So for me, in terms of an advice, is to really look for people that, that you can do great partnerships with. If you're not the person that has it takes a different talent to really be able to put a message in an engaging way, in a fun way, in a limited amount of space, right? So like if I personally would have sat down and wrote this book, I'm pretty sure I could relay the message. I'm pretty sure it could be fun. I don't think I could have done funny. I don't think I could have done rhyming everything. Rhyming, forget it. It would be impossible for me to rhyme with my Portuguese, but just really, I think that if you are a person that it's like, listen to this and go, hey, I really have this passion for this and I really want to express this way, but I have no idea how to do it. And I know it's not my strongest suit, then it's to really go and find somebody that can inspire you to really express the right way and then can hear you. I think that, the beauty of what Adam did, Adam was able to listen what I was passionate about in our conversations, which, a lot of times with writers and people, we've worked with a lot of creative people, they come in with an idea and they want to lock into that because that's like they're taking a autonomy, right? Of like, no, this is my right because this is my expertise, this is what I do. So I'm coming in loaded. And finding somebody that you can partner with that can actually share the voice. I think that would be my advice if somebody that is looking to somebody to partner with, because really the author on this, the Mr. Adam right here, can talk from the author perspective.
I think that, when it comes to collaboration, what Camila's saying is exactly right. It's very important to be able to listen and come with an open mind and have a really free-flowing exchange of ideas. And, depending on the project, that can get very involved. There can be a lot of give and take. People can get very entrenched in their positions and start becoming defensive or start just litigating, and sometimes that can be fruitful. Sometimes that's how it needs to go. I mean, there are writing partners of mine who, like I have a screenwriting partner who will come and stay with us when he and I are working because we work best in a room together. He has the freedom to travel. I do not, but I have the freedom to let him stay in this room that I'm sitting in right now. And, my daughter Viv was like, all you and Danny do is yell at each other. And I'm like, yeah, but that's the process. To you, it sounds like yelling. To us, it sounds like friendship, but that's our dynamic,
And we did, in our process, Adam, we didn't fully agree with everything. We had back and forths of questions and everything. Because I remember I was actually in the South with friends in the middle of the night, sitting this little staircase, talking to you on the phone, going, but what about this? What about that? Like, we had the back and forths, but it was not painful.
No. Yeah, no, it wasn't. But yeah, we did have the back and forth. I mean, there should always be that back and forth. I think, to me, collaboration is such an interesting thing because for years I didn't really do it on a creative level because I was just writing novels. So I was alone in a room, just me. And the collaboration didn't come until that novel was like sold and an editor was telling me how to change it. And of course, by that time, you're heavily entrenched in your position because you've spent years, and to switch that mind state and be open and receptive and also figure out how to get to the bottom of a note is really important. I find that more and more as I do more and more, not just collaborate with writers, but now that I do a lot of screenwriting and I'm getting notes from the studio, notes from the producers, right? And it's an art to be able to listen and take notes, but it's also an art to dissect the note and get to the core thing. And I think Camila and I did a little of that. It was like, getting from like, there's something not right about this line or something not right about this sentiment. Sometimes that's intuitive and you don't necessarily know exactly what's wrong with it. I would see this with my students too when I taught writing, when I was in a workshop setting. Somebody will put forth an objection, but it can be a lot of unpacking to get to the root so that you're diagnosing the disease, not just the symptoms, right? Somebody might think the problem is with a piece of dialogue, but if you really talk it through, you find that that's just a symptom and the real problem is with the character, for example, or some exec is telling you something that is totally incomprehensible and you're just like, and that if you ask too many questions, they're going to see you as a problem. So you're like, all right, it's like a game show or something where you're like, all right, if I ask 4 questions, I'm a problem. So I only have 3 questions to figure out what in the world this dude is trying to say to me, because it makes no sense to me. But I got to address it, and I got to, make him feel like he's a genius for saying it. So, I don't know. And I think, and it's across all art forms. Like I remember very early on in a good friend of mine's career as a musician, he was doing jingles for commercials. And I would always be in his studio because he lived around the corner from me. And I remember he was doing music for a network that no longer exists. And the note they gave him, they were like, yeah, we want something that sounds like Tito Puente, but not Latin. And he was like, the two of us just sat there for like hours, like, Tito Puente, but not Latin. What do we do? And I feel like I've been getting that note ever since. Make it Tito Puente, but not Latin. And you're like,
oh my gosh.
All right, I'm on it. I'll have something to do first thing Monday,
I know you need to go, Camila, and now we've run totally late, and I'm sorry. But this has been so much fun, and thank you both for chatting about Just Try One Bite. I know it will be a huge success, so congratulations in advance. And it was really great to meet you both.
Yes, thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's good to see you, Camila.
Yes.
Next time we'll be in person, right? We're going to be in LA.
Oh, yeah? Oh, I want to come. I'm in LA a lot.
You in LA? Yeah, we're doing... Sure. The one event we're doing together is at the Grove in LA.
When is it?
On April 1st, I think. No. I'm going
to look it up. I'll look it up.
April 3rd.
Third.
April 3rd at Barnes & Nobles and the Grove.
Very exciting. Awesome.
Yeah.
And Camila, I'm sending you my books. Okay.
Please do.
Okay. Okay. All right. Bye, both of you.
Right.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram at Zibby Owens and at Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. Also sign up for my newsletter at zibbyowens.com and sign up for my virtual book club and meet lots of authors on Zoom every other week. Thanks so much to Steve and Ryan at Texture Sound for the sound editing. And thank you to Morning Moon Productions for providing this fantastic intro and outro music.